It's where Ottawa comes to talk.
It shouldn't be happening in a Western democracy.
There's plenty there to be angry about.
It's time for Ottawa Today with Mark Sutcliffe on 1310 News and simulcast on Rogers TV.
Coming up at 11:30 this morning, we'll be joined by Conservative leadership candidate Andrew Scheer. Also ahead before noon today, Diane Deans will join us, the Ottawa City Councillor who is raising questions about the timetable for light rail. Is it behind schedule or not? How much information are city councillors getting, let alone the public? Diane Deans seems to be suggesting that it's not enough. On the Power Lunch today, we'll be joined by Matt Scoff of the Ottawa Police Association and Sherilyn Starkey, who's the president of Thornley Fallis. We are joined now by Elliot Tepper, Carleton University political science professor, who's with us every Wednesday on Ottawa Today to look at the world and break it down for us and talk about the impact that it has on Canada. Elliot, good morning.
Good morning.
We are going to start this week with France, and this is an election. You know, normally we don't care that much about elections in France, but this is another of these milestone elections that a lot of people are watching closely to kind of gauge the status of some of the populist movements that have been rising up in many Western democracies.
Yes, we've talked about this really from long ago. We had this on the horizon as it approached, and we've had the first round. 11 candidates have now been winnowed down to the final two, and one of these two will become president of France. And in the French system, that's a very powerful position. It's not a ceremonial position. So the executive president is about to be elected. Will it be either the centrist Macron, or will it be the daughter of the founder of the National Front, who's now fired her father because he was too xenophobic and anti-Semitic, and she has moved to the center. So Marine Le Pen is in contention. And what we've talked about here, and this is just an update from before, was that this is really a contest for the soul of France and for the future of Europe. We've talked about this in the past, that the soul of France is in contest because what kind of France does France want to be is now on the ballot. Forward-looking, EU-oriented, or bring back the borders, France for the French. Very much a Trump model being followed very closely. And I don't know who started the model. Maybe he's following her and succeeded. But the point is he succeeded. And she is following that. We're going to raise the borders. We're going to kick out Muslims. We're going to protect you. I'm going to bring back your jobs. And she did very well, coming in second, so getting into the final round. So what's happened in the last week? In the last week, as I think we talked about, she's now going very seriously to win. She has moved to the center. She has said she's leaving the leadership of her party so that she can be the president of all of France. But really, she's trying to now go after the votes of the second and third candidates who lost. There was a four-place finish, basically almost a tie, with Macron coming in on the top by almost 1 million votes. So it was a good-sized victory. But as I suggested, she was going to be going after, by moving away from her party and trying to move to the center, the traditional rural and Catholic vote that Fillon, the only mainstream party left in the final four, the old party of Charles de Gaulle, he lost, and she's going seriously after him. Now, there was another candidate, a fellow that came out of nowhere, Mélenchon. He is a far left candidate, and she's also going after some of his. So she's saying, I'm a populist, you're a populist, come on over. But really, the big ticket item here is going after that countryside vote. She's already sopped up the equivalent of the Rust Belt. She did very well among youth. Now she wants to move to the countryside. And she did it, as it turns out, this is the news of the day, by not only saying, I really like the things that Fillon stood for, she gave his speech literally. And she's now being accused of plagiarism. And the French media is having a field day with this, showing the two speeches side by side. And sure enough, she copied him very, very closely. I mean, it is that serious that she's going after his vote, that she's actually using his actual vocabulary and even the content, down to some fine details like quoting Clemenceau, to get that vote.
What does it mean that she's leaving the leadership of her party? right before the election. I think a lot of people have been confused by that.
Yes, and yes.
This would be the equivalent, I assume, of Donald Trump a week before the presidential election saying, I'm no longer a Republican, but I'm still a candidate. I mean, what does it mean?
In his case, he had to declare he was a Republican because he wasn't. I think it's a transparent tactic to say that I'm no longer associated with that far right, but it's meaningless because if Marine Le Pen comes to power, the National Front comes to power.
Right.
Her party is in power. So it is an attempt to further moderate the party's image. She's had some bad luck that way. Her inner circle, once again, has been caught up with neo-Nazi activities in the media there, and there's been some unfortunate comments.
But is it a symbolic move, or is it...
No, it's a tactical move.
Yeah.
It is meant to be a symbolic move. I don't think it turns out many people will buy it. But the fact that she is, in a sense, backpedaling to the center as fast as she can is the meaningful story. She's still trailing behind. She's still at something like 60-40. It does look today, if the polls are right, like Macron will come in. But remember, the polls were way, way off when it came to Brexit. They were way off when it came to Trump and a few other places.
Right.
They were accurate in the first round despite the closeness. But it's a very fateful election because if France leaves the EU, which is pretty likely under a leadership of Le Pen, then there is no more an EU as we've known it for the past 70 years. This bastion of peace and prosperity and security and promotion of democracy is under assault, as are the elites everywhere. So even if she doesn't win, how much more firmly will the populist flag be planted in the heart of Europe?
The polls suggest that Macron is close to 60% and that she's at around 40%. Yes. I would hope that would be that it would be less likely in a scenario like that the polls would be wrong than Brexit or the American presidential election, where it was a lot narrower. So you could argue that within the margin of error, there was enough that could happen that would lead to a different result from the one that people were predicting.
But when her father unexpectedly got into the final two the last time, he got beaten by 81%. Now it's down to 60. So this cresting of the populist right, and it is a populist right-wing attempt to come to power, is perhaps the major story going on right now.
But it would be a shock if she won at this point. But my next question was going to be, there are a lot of people, like after the election in the Netherlands, who are prepared to declare this sort of populism movement over because Le Pen loses the election, if that's what happens. But I would say it's far from over. I would say that if she gets 40% of the vote, it's a sign that this is a real political movement now.
It's a political movement. You and I are in full agreement on this. That has made remarkable strides. But the main thing is, as we said at the time of the Trump election, is the change in the zeitgeist of Europe and of the discourse in the West. The kind of vocabulary you now see as legitimate, the kind of protest movements, the kind of rejection of the values that have dominated the post-Second World War Europe and America and Canada, all of that has been brought into question by the Trump victory, by Brexit, and now by the, however close she comes, by the great move forward by the center-right, the populist right, the xenophobic, close-the-borders right in Europe, in the heart of Europe, in France.
All right. We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about Donald Trump and some of what he's been saying about world leaders, including Kim Jong-un. We'll have an update on the situation in North Korea. We'll look at his foreign policy for the first 100 days. Remember, there were a lot of people who were saying he wasn't even going to make it to day 100. And here we are in the second 100 days of Donald Trump's presidency. Elliot Tepper is our guest every Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock to talk about all the big stories in international politics. And after we're finished our discussion, Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leadership candidate, is going to join us at 11:30 this morning on Ottawa Today.